It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
I'm all in favour of removing red tape that slows things down. I'm in favour of productivity, but productivity needs to be holistic and it needs to understand what the implications of red tape are on the life cycle of a building and the cost to ordinary Australians who are investing their hard-earned cash into a home, not understanding that it could end up costing them a fortune in the long-term future.
And that is Kate McHugh in Sydney on the Real Estate Breakfast this morning as we connect you to what is going on in your local area across Australia. And we're doing that every morning. And if you've got a real estate story to share with us, let us know by either emailing us or you can now leave this voice message. Very, very easy to do. In the show notes below, you'll see a link. Just tap on that. You can start talking. You can redo it. This is the good part, as many times as you like before you hit send, because more voices, the better, which is why we are talking to hundreds of different people every year. More opinions and ideas. It all helps to flavour up that melting pot of influence, and we need plenty of ideas in 2025. Don't forget the email address is myrealestatepodcast@gmail.com. Gee, look at the date. I just saw that out of the corner of my eye. Today is Tuesday, August the 26th. September, spring is just about here. And on Saturday, we were talking about Strata and those flammable panels with Michael Tees. And then part two of that was yesterday. And today, because Strata is such a big issue and multiple things going on in Australia around it, we are going to continue that conversation as we catch up with Kate McHugh from Sydney, as I mentioned. She is from the Strata Futures initiative. And good morning, Kate. Welcome into the Real Estate Breakfast. First off, I want to talk about the missing piece in Australia's housing reform. Housing Minister Claire O'Neil is pushing to cut red tape for builders and developers, but the housing crisis debate has that blind spot, and you have talked about that, and that being Strata.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Yeah, Strata is a critical component of the solutions to Australia's housing crisis, with 50% of Australians expected to live in Strata by 2050. It's poorly understood by the general population, and Strata is frequently omitted from conversations about housing and development. Yet it's the Strata sector that's left to manage the life cycle of anything but freestanding housing. So it's an important part of the conversation.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that is definitely worthwhile mentioning, and that is with housing prices climbing, what have we been seeing over the last 3, 4, 5 years? More Australians are buying apartments and townhouses because they are cheaper. So there's a lot more activity in that sector of the market, which is also probably leading to some nervousness.
Absolutely. It's seen as a cost-effective solution to housing, but as I mentioned already, it's poorly understood. The public need to understand that when they buy into Strata, they have rights and obligations that go beyond freestanding housing. The Strata sector rightly has come under criticism in recent years. However, what that function does is poorly understood. And so our Strata Futures initiative has been an engagement to explore how the sector can take ownership of its future, take accountability and invest in its own future.
So the underlying point that you're making is the current system is not ready for this rapid growth. And the Strata Futures report, it is outlining 64 practical recommendations, including stronger education for owners and buyers and a whole lot of other points that you'd like to step over for everybody this morning.
Yes, I won't read the entire report out. There is a radical rethink required for the approach to supporting lot owners or apartment owners, as they may think of themselves. And fundamental to the recommendations is establishing metrics for deeper understanding of performance of buildings as a whole, the influence and impact of decision making on asset value and protection, and that includes regulation from the state governments. And this goes in hand with an uplift in the skills, knowledge and performance required of the people operating in this sector. It's really critical to the short-term and medium-term health of Australian strata living that there is an uplift in this sector and that it improves its reputation.
And you talk about the National Task Force to investigate creating this Strata Cooperative Research Centre that would deliver the data research and the evidence needed for long-term evidence-based policy on strata. It's another missing component by the sound of it.
So the 64 recommendations we've come up with requires a high level of coordination between all of the different stakeholders operating in this environment. No one body can really fix the problems, not a peak industry body, not an owner advocacy body, not individual strata managers themselves, not the insurance, not the banking sector. It's about people working together. And one effective way of doing that is pulling together a task force or some kind of initiative. And we've highlighted the CRC model as an effective way that has proven in other sectors to provide research, development, extension and innovation to uplift a sector. So we've proposed a task force to put together to explore the possibility of a cooperative research centre and undertake that bid process.
And residential strata, it is this asset class across Australia. I think one of the foundational things that you'd like to see is how do you de-risk this part of the housing market?
Absolutely. Residential strata is about 15 to 20%, depending on where you are, of the residential housing market. It's not seen as a separate asset class, but because of the nature of title being so different, it should be treated slightly differently. In particular, the rights and obligations of anyone buying into strata are different to buying a freestanding house. And that has an impact not only on a lot owner buying a lot or an apartment, it also probably has longer term impacts on risk in home lending books. It has long-term impacts on the government's ability to deliver on housing. Insurance are also a player in this market, and they all have a role to play in the stakeholder engagement and uplift of knowledge in the population and how to de-risk this sector. And that's because as buildings age and the maintenance requirements of those buildings falls onto volunteer committees, known as strata committees or owners corporations, there's a lot of work that has to be done by people who aren't necessarily knowledgeable in those areas. And then they're leaning on strata managers to help them execute those functions for the safety, security, and long-term asset management of multi-million-dollar properties.
I mentioned at the start that the Housing Minister, Claire O'Neill, is pushing to cut red tape for builders and developers. I guess the flip side of all of that is you've got to be very careful, don't you? Because you can't have it too loose, because otherwise we get into dangerous territory which we don't want to revisit. And I'm talking about, the apartment market as you are, and making sure that the code is all sort of specced up right.
But it's really important that any removal of red tape doesn't affect the housing quality that's being built. There's long-term impacts of defects, particularly in apartment living, that have repercussions throughout the life cycle of housing. And so I would not want to see a removal of red tape around the process of ensuring that buildings are built to spec, built with the appropriate qualities, and that there are appropriate recourse mechanisms for people buying into apartments. And the reason for that is that the defects often take quite some time to discover, having been an apartment dweller and owner myself. And the long-term maintenance of a building is really what's at stake there. So I'm all in favour of removing red tape that slows things down. I'm in favour of productivity, but productivity needs to be holistic, and it needs to understand what the implications of red tape are on the life cycle of a building and the cost to ordinary Australians who are investing their hard-earned cash into a home, not understanding that it could end up costing them a fortune in the long-term future if the buildings aren't built to spec and if the accountability for that is taken away.
You know, the education piece and all of this has to be there, doesn't it? Just given so many Australians don't do correct due diligence. And we've said it before, you know, you can have one set of due diligence for a house. If you are buying into a complex, I mean, that is a completely different animal. And are you still surprised in 2025 that we've got people that just don't do the due diligence?
I'm not surprised at all because I've fallen foul to this many years ago myself. I think that we don't really have education at any level or public awareness at any level of what strata is. In Australia, we have this great Australian dream of owning a home. And for many of us, that home might be an apartment, not a freestanding house. And the nature of what comes with buying into an apartment is very, very different. And I think the focus is too much on due diligence, like having the right lawyer, having the right buyer's agent, having the right conveyancer who understands strata law deeply. And there is a shortage of that. For most people, due diligence isn't enough. There needs to be just broad understanding amongst the population of what the strata is, a different type of housing, and that it's not the same as buying a freestanding home. There are obligations around common property, for example. There are a lot of conveyancing lawyers, estate agents, buyer's agents who don't really understand strata themselves. So saying that this is a buyer beware due diligence problem is probably an oversimplification of the issue, which is why we think that there needs to be a sector-wide approach with government support to make sure that buying into strata is understood, de-risked, that legislation and regulation is based on real evidence. People supporting this sector are well educated, professional, and able to support the real issues in this kind of property type that does obviously have peculiarities.
And if you don't have the instinct to go down that rabbit hole of making sure that you do fantastic due diligence, just do at least this. You know, if it's one message we can get across, the aluminium composite panels with the polyethylene core, which contributed to those rapid spread of fires around the world. Make sure that you are hunting out those in these apartment complexes. All right, Kate, well, thank you for being the trifecta in all of this, talking about strata and coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
We are more than just a real estate podcast. We cover a multitude of subjects, including property data, current buyer-seller sentiment, and the mood of the market. Follow each week all of the main talking points and know your property.
1 square metre of aluminium composite panel cladding is equivalent to 5 litres of petrol. And we've got these on buildings all over the world and certainly in Australia. The focus has been on high-rise because of the deaths in Grenfell and because we had a major fire in Melbourne at La Crosse in 2014 where the building was evacuated. Fortunately, no one lost their life.
It is just another tragedy waiting to happen. And we know that it's going to happen, right? Because of the volume of this dangerous product out there right across Australia. Do we actually know how many of these panelled buildings are in Australia right now?
It's uncertain how many buildings have it. Some estimates have it in around 3,000 or 4,000 buildings in Australia, although the New South Wales Cladding Authority, which is called Project Remediate, has the number at much less than that.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.